Taking the Lead, 5 Things Every Supervisor Needs to Know, hosted by HRDQ-U and presented by Dr. Annette Cremo. Today's webinar will last around 1 hour. If you have any questions, you can always type them into the chat box. We will be answering questions as they come in live at the end of the presentation or as a follow-up by email. My name is Sarah Schaefer, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Dr. Annette Cremo is a seasoned organizational development professional with over 20 years of experience in training, organization development, and human resources. Her clients include GlaxoSmithKline, Daikon Lutheran Ministries, Microsoft, Conemaugh Health Systems, the Pennsylvania State Police, and Pfeiffer. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I am excited to be here and honored that I am doing this seminar. I'll tell you, the supervisory group is probably my favorite group to work with because at this point in their careers, they are so hungry for knowledge and for any help that they can get. And I think the information here in Taking the Lead, 5 things that supervisors need to know, is just so important to share with them. I often start my supervisory sessions with a quote to the supervisors by saying, you know, people will stay in an organization because of their supervisor, and they will leave an organization because of their supervisor. And I don't know how true that is for all of you, but I know it's certainly true for me. And I hear so many people saying that is so right, that the supervisors are that first line of the employees to the organization, and they have so much an impact. And that's why I think it's important that we do focus our efforts on supervisory training, supervisory learning. And if you look at, I don't know if it's like this in many of your organizations, but my supervisors are promoted to a supervisor because they know their job well. They are good at their technical skills. And so organizations say that's probably the best person to make a supervisor. They probably are. But what I think organizations neglect to do is realize that supervisory skills are an entirely different skill set than the skills that they have learned. So while they may be technically proficient, when it comes to supervision, that we have not given them the skills they need to be successful. And so this webinar is designed just to look at some of those things. The agenda for today, if we're going to go to the next slide on the webinar agenda, and Sarah, I don't know if you want to take over here and advance it to the next slide for the webinar agenda. Thank you. Reviewing the 5 key skills, supervisory skills. We want to look at a proven research supervisory model that does work. Identify supervisory strengths and weaknesses and how to do that through an assessment tool that I'm going to give you some examples of that. The application, situation, and best action. Supervisory do's and don'ts, we'll talk about that. How to develop the supervisor skills, and then any questions and answers that you may have. I do have a question for you, and I'd like you just to jot that down in your chat box if you could for a minute, and think about the best supervisor that you've had in your lifetime. And what are the 2 things that they did that made them the greatest supervisor in your mind? So just take a minute, and if you would just jot those things down. I'm going to read them as they come through. All right, good. We've got a lot of answers here. That's great. You know, some of the things that people have written are that I could trust them, they had my back, they communicated well, they coached me to improve my performance, they helped me develop, they were honest, they had great feedback for me, and I see one that said they did their job well, and that's, I think, so far all that I've gotten. But it's kind of interesting when you look at what makes a great supervisor. I want to look at the next slide then to see the great supervision. Sarah, if you could advance this for me. Great supervision. You've just been given an award for excellent supervision in the year of 2013. So we're looking at last year, you got the award. It was created and voted on by employees. What makes excellence in supervision? This is another thing I'm going to ask you to jot down your answers for, A or B. What makes excellent supervision? Technical expertise or excellent relationships? If you could just put those down right now. Okay, I see some of you have some technical expertise as being priority one, and most of you have the excellent relationships. Well, research has shown that excellent relationships is probably the key to great supervision. Excellent relationships with the employees, excellent relationships with the organization, and even external vendors. All right, Sarah, if you want to get the next slide, please. Great supervision, it's a balance between the goals of the organization and the needs of the work group. Great supervision, you develop great supervisors by identifying what they do well, how they need to be developed, and where there are any performance gaps, if any. I'll tell you, the supervisory role, the primary role is a link between management of the organization and the employees. The supervisors, they're accountable to the management for making sure the work gets done and make sure it gets done the right way according to expectations set by the organization. And also, they are, another responsibility is to their own employees, to the team, for helping them develop. All right, Sarah, if you want to advance that slide. So this is the model that we're looking at. And you'll see in this model that the supervisor uses direction from the organization to perform his or her job. And this direction is needed to guide the work that the group does, right? And you do this in a couple ways. In order to accomplish the work, the supervisor has to organize the work. They have to develop the work, develop their employees, manage performance, both formally and informally, and manage relationships of not just one group, but many groups. So when you're looking at the model here, you'll see at the arrow at the end says manage relations. And I think it's not just with the work group, but the supervisor needs to manage relationships with the work group, with their manager, with the organization. It could be managed relationships with vendors, or with anybody else, maybe with the government, with anybody else that they deal with. So that's, to me, one of the key aspects of a supervisory skill set. It's important to know here that all these skills that we're going to be talking about are not just automatically known by supervisors. They do require work. They require information. They require training. They require discovery. And the supervisor should not be able to handle every situation the right way right from the start. I think the supervisors need to know that in order to learn, they have to balance the organizational perspective and also how they're going to develop their employees. So what we want to do for the rest of the webinar is to sort of take a deeper dive into this and look at each one of these specific skill sets that the supervisors need. We want to go now into guiding the work. All right, if you want to advance the slide, Sarah. We're going to ask you a question. It's an application or a situation, and I'm going to read this, and I'd like you then to put in your chat box the answer you think is the best answer for this situation. A project your group received for about 3 weeks ago seems stalled, even though your group knows it's important to your best customer. You decide to have a talk with your group about what the problem is. How would you start this discussion? Would you tell your group that you need to know what's going on with the project and tell them you're going to accept whatever changes they suggest? Would you start by stating clearly that the project must be completed and then discuss their expectations for completion and yours? Or would you tell the group that the project is now top priority and give them a completion date? So if you could jot down your answers then please in the chat, and then just take about 15 seconds to do that. I want to see what I get from that. All right, thank you. Sarah, do you want to change it to the next slide, please, in guiding the work? And so the best answer for this is by stating clearly that the project must be completed then discuss the expectations for completion in yours. In guiding the work, I want you to remember that it involves understanding the direction of the organization and translating that into actionable plans for the work group. I think it's important that you know that that people know what the clear expectations are from the start, and then that the discussion also includes a team commitment when it comes to guiding the work. From a supervisor's viewpoint, the work must be, sometimes the vision or the mission of the organization is known to the supervisor and it's broader than the work group itself. They understand a bigger picture, and it could include the organization's goals, it could be their mission, it could be where their strategic vision of where they're going. It's not always easy for a supervisor to be focused just on the needs of the work group, although if you think about supervision itself, supervisors came from that work group and their perspective probably is focused on that group. But now the direction of her or his group has to also be supportive of the organization. And sometimes giving out the direction of what has to be done is not always, and success is not always the same thing. The supervisor has to align their work towards organization goals in a way that the employees know that their needs, their challenges, their concerns are also being understood and considered. And it may not be comfortable, particularly with a new supervisor, because you have this sort of phenomenon from buddy to boss, where I was your coworker and friend for many, many years, and we used to do things a certain way and say things a certain way, and all of a sudden now I have become your boss. But it's important, though, for that supervisor to act in a way that she or he is now aligned with the organization goals. And from guiding the work naturally comes planning and what has to be done next. And so planning the workflow follows in a natural direction to the organization. And they have to make specific commitments to it and sort of hold themselves to the standard of being in alignment with the organization, yet maintaining this balance of caring for the employees. I think at this point here in guiding the work, the supervisors need to know what the goals, the strategy, the big picture of the organization is, and they need to know how. They need to know how to plan, and they need to know their employees. How do I give certain employees information? Because everybody is different. All right, Sarah, if you want to advance it to the next slide, please. All right. Guiding the work, some do's and don'ts. Understanding the needs of the organization and planning your group's work effectively to meet those needs. What you want to do is to make sure that, first of all, you support your organization's goals, get your employees involved in the planning process so you hear what they have to say, act decisively, make plans with specific progress review and dates so people know exactly where they are. And it has to do with holding them, I think, accountable as well, and holding yourself accountable as a supervisor. What you don't want to do is tell employees that you disagree with management positions, that I don't know why they're saying this or making us do things. You always have to support management and the organization's decisions. Consistently prepare detailed plans without consulting your employees. You don't want to do that. You do not want to put off making decisions until you're sure that they are perfect. I think it's one of the things I hear from employees, that their supervisor can't make a decision, and it's like, you know, it's already done, and they should have done it ahead of time. And the last one is fail to assign responsibility for tasks. You want to make sure people know what they are responsible for by telling them what that is. All right, if you want to change to the next slide, please. Guiding the work. For skill improvement, some suggestions that we have is make it clear to your work group that you support the organizations and its goals. Provide direction even in unfamiliar areas. Balance asking for information by acting decisively. Plan in advance who, what, and how. Create specific and realistic plans and gain commitment by actively involving your work group. Sit down, listen to what they have to say. You may not agree. Their plans may not be what you think they should be, but I think it's important, though, that you also get back to them and let them know the why. If it's not going to work, if they make it a suggestion, so get back to them all the time. All right, The next one we want to do is, you want to do the next slide, please? Organizing the work. Right. In organizing the work, I want you to keep in mind that organizing work revolves around reviewing assignments and tasks. It looks at handling priorities and also dealing with unexpected problems that arise naturally in the workplace. All right, if you want to take the next slide, here's our next question for you to see how you would your answer to this application. You have appointed one of your people as the leader in a project. It's clear that another employee is really seen as the leader in the group. The project is progressing well, but it worries you that the leadership is not where you want it to be. So what would you do? Make it clear to the group who the leader is and who you support, and don't tolerate other sources of leadership. Appoint a leader who has the group's support as a formal project leader, or just don't interfere in organizing the work. All right, so take a minute and jot down your answers in the chat, A, B, or C. All right, Sarah, I think we have most people said they would say C, and C is the answer, don't interfere. Why? Because for most cases, informal leadership is not harmful to the organization. As you know, I think in many organizations, priority shift, focus shifts, and I think sometimes in many organizations it's constant reorganization or change in some way, and that is difficult. And I think what's important here in organizing the work and letting people know what they're supposed to do is to communicate understanding of priorities in the organization, and make sure the supervisor tells the work group or their team what is expected from them. The supervisor, I think, at all times needs to keep the needs of their team in mind as they organize the work. What are their strengths of the people on the team? What are some of the challenges? What are the priorities of the organization? And in organizing the work, to do it efficiently requires the assistance of people with more knowledge sometimes than yourself, which means that sometimes we have to go outside of the people's work group. And I know the supervisors that I speak with, I mean, they are proud that they've gotten to this position, and sometimes they don't want to go out and ask anybody else because they don't want to be seen as, in their terms, incompetent, but it's not. They have to make sure that they start communicating across boundaries and getting information from other groups. As a supervisor, they're always learning. Learning does not stop, and they're going to be learning from other groups in the organization. And in order to organize the work the best, we have to make sure we have that broad base of knowledge so we can make sure that the work gets done from our team the best way possible. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please, to look at some of the do's and don'ts here. First of all, align people and allocate resources to accomplish the work goals. And that's what organizing the work is all about. What you want to make sure that you do is set schedules to meet organizational goals, use others' expertise when necessary, keep track of what's going on in the information in the organization, involve others if you have to reorganize. What you don't want to do is accept work changes without question. Make sure you know what's going on and why it's going on, because you're going to be asked that. Don't show favoritism or fail to assign unpleasant tasks. Don't fail to assign responsibility for necessary tasks. And don't try to have complete knowledge of all aspects of the work. And one other don't I want to add in there is don't be afraid to hold people accountable for the work that you've assigned. That's one of the, I think, the biggest challenges. We're going to get to that later on in some of the competencies, especially when it comes to managing performance. But accountability is one of the things I think many organizations and supervisors should be working on. So when people make that commitment, we are able to hold them accountable. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Organizing the work, some skill improvement areas are how to handle shifting priorities, investigate unforeseen problems and know how you might want to solve them, consult employees to gain complete knowledge of the work. As a supervisor, you may have some hands-on. Supervisors do tend to get the work done themselves by doing it themselves, and Sometimes we can't get away from that, but as a supervisor, you should be getting the work done through people. So the people who are on the front line doing the work have they have a good knowledge of, maybe where the glitches are, where the concerns are, what's going well, what's not going well. So consult them and pick their brains and see, because it makes them involved more in the team and in the organization. You want to make sure that they follow the rules, regulations, and guidelines of the organization, and also accommodate the needs of your work group when they are not in direct conflict with organizational needs. And again, I think we have to also point out here that every organization is different, so what works in one may not work in the other. So you as the trainer or as the manager need to know what your organization expects from that supervisor and go in alignment or accordance with that. All right, if you want to go to the next slide then, please. All right, the next one is developing your staff. When we talk about developing your staff, it involves actively working to increase the skill level of each employee by learning his or her strengths and assigning tasks according to development needs of your team or of your staff. All right, so if you want to go to the next slide, keeping that in mind, I want you to look at this question and answer this question. You believe that one of the people you supervise has the potential to be promoted, but that person lacks confidence in his or her abilities. How would you build that confidence? Would it be A, give the employee a challenging assignment that you are sure that he or she can complete with some effort? Give the employee an easy assignment and then praise them when the assignment is completed? Or would you C, praise the employee publicly each time he or she completes an assignment? So if you take about 10 seconds just to jot down your answers there in the chat box, please. Okay, Sarah, if you want to go to that next slide, please. All right, the Becks Action, how would you do it? Give the employee a challenging assignment that you are sure that they can complete, but with some effort. So you want to stretch them a little bit. It creates more engagement. It helps them get greater self-esteem on completion. And for me also, it helps with some of their critical thinking and problem-solving skills and shows them that they could win. When you are developing your staff, it's important to know how much each employee knows and to know them as an individual. Every employee has their own skills, abilities, needs, and personality, and a supervisor who is aware of these unique features of each one of their team will be equipped to help him or her meet their potential. It is, in developing your staff, it is an investment of your time. And I know my supervisors say, well, that's one thing we don't have enough of. We're required to do so much in so little time, and it's not on our priority. Well, I think as most of you know, you either pay me now or pay me later. We have to make sure that, we get the work done, but if we don't train our staff and develop our staff or develop our employees on how to do it, we will become trapped in just getting the work done ourselves without having the staff or your team complete it. All right, the way out of this trap is through delegation. Delegation works to build employees' confidence and skill base and doing things in the organization. And it also adds some challenging and engaging work for the employee too. And I think some of my supervisors really, they hesitate on delegation because what I hear from them is, I've done it before and I know how to do it the best way, so I'm going to tell them what to do. I'm just going to do it myself. That's how the work could get done, but in order for to be a great supervisor, and I said this in the first question that I asked you, was that they were able to coach me to a higher level of development. And I think that's one thing that employees are looking to do. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please. In developing your staff, some things that you should do is delegate work so it develops your employee skills. You want to get to know the employees on an individual basis. You want to keep employees informed about the status of their requests. let them know, and make sure your expectations for results are clear when you delegate the tasks. I think this also goes into when you look at their personality or their communication styles. Sometimes we delegate or tell people things and we think they know what they mean, and at the end of the task, when the task is done, you may not get the exact thing that you anticipated because the employee may not have heard what you said. So I think communication is the key. If you look at communication in the workplace, communication is the #1 problem out there. Either insufficient, inconsistent, or confusing communication. So remember that in developing the staff, that communication is one of the keys there. What you don't want to do is complete the tasks yourself because they require effort to teach others. Yes, it does require time, but it's going to pay off in the long run. Treat employees as a group rather than individuals. Everybody is an individual. They all have their unique style, their unique competency, and their unique personality, and I think we have to celebrate that and use that. And as a supervisor, know what that is. You don't want to forget to tell your employees about the status of their requests, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, at least they know. And last, you don't want to delegate to people only who already have the skill for the task, but you develop them by giving other people the opportunity to learn that particular skill. All right, if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. The skill improvement here, take time to delegate. Know how to delegate, know how to challenge. Delegate work that develops employee skills and does not require formal authority, your formal authority. Delegate to employees who need development and who are willing to be developed. And I think when we go on to managing performance, you know, it says willingness to be developed. Some people do not want to be developed, and in that case, you sometimes have to manage them out of the organization, but that's okay. You want to make sure you have a strong team. Next, you want to provide clear expectations and follow up regularly with people to make sure, just check in on, see how they're doing. And lastly, set challenging and realistic goals for your work group. All right, good. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? All right, our next slide here is in managing performance. All right. Managing performance, I think, is one of the keys, yet maybe one of the more challenging things that a supervisor has to do. In managing performance, it includes monitoring performance of the employees and helping them meet their own objectives as well as those of the organization. It involves a discussion, it involves coaching, and it's an ongoing process. It's just not a once and done, once a year thing. It is a weekly, it's a bi-weekly thing that you need to do with your employees. So you want to go to the next question. Here's a sample of the question that you can ask them. The application, one of your employees is always just a little bit late in completing his or her assigned tasks. It hasn't really affected the work, but annoys others. What would you do? Schedule a formal performance review meeting with the employee and document it. Tell others in your work group to work around it. It's only a minor problem. Or have a short informal meeting in which you tell this employee about the impact of the problem and discuss solutions with him or her. So if you would take a minute and put it in your chat box, which one would you choose? All right, let's see what you chose. On the next one, it is C. So most of you did choose C, have a short informal meeting in which you tell the employee the impact of the problem and discuss the solution. Why is this the right answer? Coaching is more effective than a formal review, and it helps employees gain awareness of their actions. So in managing performance, I think coaching is just so important, and the obstacles that employee performance can be found when you're looking at performance. When you're looking at employee performance, you can look within the employee, but also within the work environment. Do you have a supportive work environment that allows for accountability or not? Some things you have to look at. An effective supervisor knows what the obstacles are and is able to manage those obstacles. And managing performance, like other skills, is a daily task. It just doesn't happen that it's once and done. In a large part, I think managing performance is about continually developing confidence in the employee and also competence within that employee. And it's all about coaching. I think if you read some of the literature that's out there, I don't know I was reading that coaching is one thing that we want supervisors and managers to do, but yet we do not teach them the process of coaching, and it is a process. If you think about the great coaches in your life as you were growing up, I mean, they knew you as a person. They knew what you were really good at. They knew what your challenges were. They also knew how to play the game. They knew what it took to win, and they were able to develop you in order to get that performance from you. And if you think about sort of that model as you go into coaching, the coaching begins with a look at, what is expected from the employee, what the employee expects as well, and it goes beyond teaching how to perform. It goes into really having them know that it is about working with them, that you care about them, you care about their development, you care about not just them at work, but who they are as a person. And I think it's more, for me, coaching is more asking and digging down deep and helping the employees self-discover, or yes, just discover in themselves what they need to do. I don't know if some of you know me, and I have a large family. I have 8 kids, and when I tell my kids what to do and how to do it, sometimes they do, and for the most part they don't. But I'll tell you, when it's their idea about what to do and how to do it, every time I will get that job done the way they said. Once they make that commitment, they go ahead and do it. And it's the same thing with, I think, the supervisory and the employee relationship, that if we allow the employees to self-discover and make a commitment or a promise that this is what I'm going to do to make myself better, you're more likely to get that, the result that you want and what they want too. When you look at coaching too, I want you to think about a couple things. I think it's important to talk about here that, first of all, we have to set expectations for the employee. And it's a big and, you have to let employees know what these expectations are. Some of my supervisors will say, yes, but they should know that they should be doing this. Maybe, but have you ever told them, no, but they should know? So as a supervisor, make sure your supervisors set expectations, know what's expected of the employee to get the job done, but also dig down even more to make sure those expectations are behavioral based, as opposed to you have to do it in a good way, or you have to do it something that a person could not see or grasp. So look at the expectations and put them into behavioral terms. Next thing, again, is definitely make sure the employee knows what these expectations are, and let them know how you're going to coach them. What are my expectations? What happens if you don't meet the expectations? How are we going to maybe help you with your skill, or maybe put you on performance improvement? So whatever, again, this is according to your organization, what the progressive policies, discipline policies are, or growth policies are. Keep them informed of that. You have to also, so once you set the expectations, do the behaviors. As a supervisor, you have to monitor performance, and this is done on a daily, on an hourly, on a minute-by-minute basis. Supervisors have to know exactly what's going on, making sure they document that as well. The good and the things that will develop into performance gaps. And I think what supervisors also need to do, and you'll see this with that first question that I asked about the great supervisor, is that, they also told me when I did good, when they caught me doing something right. Because when you catch somebody doing something right, they know, first of all, that you've been watching them, second of all, that you value them, and especially when you say thank you for what they have done right. And I'll tell you, many times, and I'll tell you what happened in my life, and it's a personal story, is that when I was married, I had a deck that had to be done, and it had to be power washed, and I thought, I'm going to do the power washing when my husband's away, and I was all excited about it, got the power washer out, did the deck, And I was so proud of what I did. He came home from his meeting, and I took him out to the deck, and I said, oh, look what I did. I was just so happy. I was like a big, my bubble was so big. And he looked at the deck, and he looked around it for a while, and he came back to me, and he said, you missed a spot. And that sort of burst my bubble. And I, when I talk to my supervisors, they say, you know what, we do that a lot too. Instead of looking for the good and finding the good and rewarding the good and commenting on what they did good, we go around looking for, you missed a spot. And I'll tell you, sometimes when you get that, it is such a demotivator for employees. So that's why I said when you monitor performance, find out what the good is, and also make sure that you acknowledge that good. You have to coach them, and when you give them feedback about their coaching, so the coaching process then is to have that conversation with them. Let them know what the expectations are. Let them know what you've observed. Let them know what they did well, and let them know what the performance gap is, and see how you can help them with that to manage their own performance and increase it. And then the last part of this whole coaching process is to make sure that you hold them accountable for what they committed to do. So in the coaching itself, you are asking for a commitment from them into what they commit to you to do, and then also at the end then let them know that you will be observing their performance and holding them accountable. And that's all in managing performance. So I think this is like one of the biggest things for me when it comes to supervision, and I think this is one area that is probably the most difficult for my supervisors to learn as well, but one of the most important. All right, Sarah, if you want to go to the next slide, please. All right, it is managing performance is tracking the performance of your employees and helping them meet their own objectives and those of the organizations. What you want to do is track performance, provide feedback on a continual basis, not just once a year, not just every 6 months, continual. I like it once a week, to be honest with you. Judge performance and how it affects the organization. So when you're giving that feedback, this is what I observed, this is how it impacts you, this is how it impacts our team, and this is how it impacts the organization. So they also can start seeing the bigger picture. Want to remain objective, and I think by putting things in behavioral terms, it allows you to be objective. Because when you say to them, these are the expectations in behavioral terms, and this is what I observed in behavioral terms, it is very objective, and there is no wiggle room whatsoever there. And the last thing you want to do is get commit from the employees to improve their performance. What you don't want to do is review only once a year, judge before you talk to the employees about their performance, make those assumptions, allow yourself to become emotional, and try to fix every problem no matter how small. The two there I just want to briefly elaborate on is judge employees before you talk with them about their performance. This has to do with our mindset. And sometimes our mindset is such that we make assumptions, and sometimes wrong assumptions about people or about what they did. And the example that I give my class is sometimes your phone's going to ring, your cell phone's going to ring, you see who it is, and it's like, oh crap, I don't want to talk to them. It's nothing but trouble. And I think as supervisors, sometimes they do that too. When a person comes in and speaks with them, they make the assumption or judgment prior to listening objectively to the individual or the situation. So it's difficult to do, but it takes practice, but you don't want to judge employees. You want to be very objective, listen to what they have to say, and then after that only to analyze what has been said and what the next step is. The next thing is to allow yourself to become emotional. This goes into a little bit of emotional intelligence. I know we had other webinars that are on there which are amazing. And that whole emotionality is kind of interesting because people in general know how to behave in order to get what they want. I tell my supervisors that their employees knows which button on their forehead to push in order to get the result that they desire sometimes. So it could be that I'm going to get angry, or I'm going to give excuses, or I'm going to cry. Because I know when I do that, my supervisor backs down and gives me what I want. So as a supervisor, what you have to do is sort of take stock of your emotional triggers and know how, this is where it goes into emotional intelligence, know how your body reacts to those, because sometimes our behaviors give that away, even though we're trying to suppress that. So know what your triggers are, know how you react to it, and learn how to control that reaction so you don't become emotional in front of your employee. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please. All right, skill improvement here. Perform these steps on an ongoing basis with employees. Tell them what you expect from them, monitor progress, and formally evaluate their performance. Provide suggested actions to improve employee performance. You provide the suggestions, but they will decide on what they want to do or the best way to do it. Address performance problems as soon as they occur. The sooner you can get to an action that you either want them to continue or to discontinue, the more likely you are to going to get the result that you're looking for. You want to learn to distinguish problems that need formal attention and those that do not. And then lastly, confront behind-the-scene problems only when they affect performance. Only when they affect performance. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please. And the last one here is managing relations. Managing relations involves developing and maintaining connections with other groups internally and externally to the organization in order to increase your effectiveness and to meet goals that have been set for you by the organization. All right, if you want to go now to the next slide, and this gives us the scenario. You have been blindsided quite a few times recently by changes in the organization. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar? That you didn't know about, but that other supervisors knew. Your group is starting to get upset. Your team is starting to get upset about this. What would you do? Ask your boss to keep you better informed about what's happening in the organization. And keep in mind, this is under managing relationships all internally in the organization. Make an effort to get to know other supervisors and talk to them about what's happening. Or, you'll never know everything. Teach your people how to react quickly to unexpected things. Shift happens. All right, so if you want to answer that question on your chat, take about 5 seconds to do that, and we'll see what you come up with. Interesting, we're having A's. A's and B's are both coming in sort of equal. So let's see what the answer is. Go to the next slide, if you will, Sarah. Thank you. It is make an effort to get to know other supervisors and talk to them about what's happening. And the reason that this is the correct answer here, it is about managing relationships within the team, within your department, within the organization. So a good source of information are other supervisors. It's also, other supervisors are also a good source of support in the organization. Supervisors and their employees do not operate in a vacuum. It takes a whole team. It takes many different departments in the organization. You may have touch points there of HR, IT, technical experts in the organization, regulatory functions, government, finances. So it's just not you and what your team does, it's everybody else in the organization. And sometimes it's difficult, I think, in today's world because we not only have employees who are, and other contributors who are in our organization, but they're also people who are off-site, people who we manage remotely, who we supervise remotely, which is another challenge. So that's why it's important to get to know people and keep that communication going. Communication is crucial to maintaining good relationships, particularly with the groups that impact your team, your department, and the organization. It can be stressful for a supervisor because sometimes the other group's needs are in conflict with the needs of her or his team, and the supervisor has to know how to maintain that delicate relationships, the delicate relationship with all those groups. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please. All right, managing relations. Work closely with others to ensure that your work group is effective and the organization's goals are met. What you want to make sure that you do is keep other groups informed about what's going on and what your plans are. Let them know. Don't operate in a vacuum yourself. Consider others' requests for help based on the needs of the organization. Become generally familiar with other groups' work and develop relationship with other supervisors. I know one of the things that have been successful in the organizations I work with are supervisors coming together on a weekly, a bi-weekly, a monthly basis to have a conversation about what challenges they face, what's happening, keeping people informed, and also just informally networking and growing the relationship between those other supervisors. Things you don't want to do: don't try to acquire the resources by complaining about your group situation. Don't try to have the complete knowledge of other people's work or their group's work. You will never know. You have not walked in their shoes. You don't want to turn down all requests for help that even though it may inconvenience your group. And you don't want to accept work from other groups without question. Make sure you know what their rationale is for it, what their expectations are, and how you're going to be working with them. So the more you can find out, the better. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please. And in managing relations, so the skill improvement here is view other work groups or teams or departments in your organization as partners. You're all working together to get the job done for the organization, and how can you do that the best way? Acquire resources by framing requests according to what is good for the organization, not just what's good for your work group or good for you. Know how and when to ask for support from other work groups. It's about, I think, that communication and relationships that you have. Respond to requests from other work groups by understanding your organization's goals, and network with other supervisors for help and information. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, please. So if you look at this, again, just to review the 5 supervisory skills and how they are interacting with each other, it is the organization sort of is the guiding force for the supervisor, and the supervisor seems to be like the intermediary between the employees and the management and the organization. But the supervisor's main job is getting the work done through the people that she or he supervises by, first of all, guiding the work, making plans, letting people know what's expected of them, organizing the work in a way that it's understandable and doable, developing their staff, helping them grow, managing performance, coaching is in here, and then lastly, managing relationships between everybody that's included in your organization and outside of your organization, anybody that makes a difference to the work that you do. Okay, Sarah, at this point I am complete with my part of the presentation here.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And we actually do have some time for a live Q&A. So attendees, why don't you go ahead and submit those questions into your chat window right now. And while we wait for those questions to come in, let me share a little bit about the foundation of the session today. And that is called the Supervisory Skills Questionnaire. This assessment is 45% off. You can review the facilitator set for 30 days risk-free, and you can use the coupon code WebinarTTL at checkout. And this set includes the guide, the PowerPoint presentation, samples of the paper and online assessments, as well as a developmental background information. All right, great. And it looks like we do have a number of questions coming in, so why don't we go ahead and get started. It looks like our first question is coming from Lou. Which one of the skills seems to give supervisors the most difficulty?
All right, thank you. You know, and before I even answer that question, Lou, as Sarah was talking, I went back to that first question that I asked about that memorable supervisor that you had and what made them so great. And I am going to say that I didn't look at all the answers before, but as she was talking, I was doing that 99% of the responses has to do with interpersonal skills. Growing, developing, telling me what's expected, all the things we just talked about. So that was kind of interesting to put that list together and compare it to what we just spoke about in this webinar. All right, the question was, which one is the most difficult for supervisors? And this is not from my perspective, but from the supervisors that I do instruct, and it is how to manage their performance. How do I give them feedback? I don't want them to dislike me. I want them to still like me. I want them to get the job done, but I'm hesitant to say anything because I don't want to hurt their feelings. And I think as a supervisor, what we need to do is sort of change our mindset, because by telling a person or letting a person know what's expected of them and letting them know if they are not living up to those expectations is a gift to them. And look at it as a gift, not as something that you're telling them that they're not good or they're not doing something right, something negative. Look at it as a positive, because I know from my perspective, if I was not doing something correctly, I would want to know. I'd want to know if I had toilet paper hanging from my shoe. Let me know if I have something that's not working right and not if I don't look right. So I think when you look at the supervisor relationship, the same thing is true with the employees. Employees, I think, value, they want to do a good job. And they want to know if as soon as possible, when they're not doing that job and giving them that feedback. But I think coaching is a skill of itself, and also I think requires another session with them on how to effectively coach. And if you are their trainer or even their manager, when they start their coaching with their employees, sit in with them and give them feedback, sort of coach to coach, because it is not just I'm going to give you this information in the seminar, or you're going to read this online and you're going to do it. It takes practice, and it takes someone who knows about coaching on how to do that in order to make sure you manage performance the best way. All right, Sarah, do you have another question?
I do, thank you. Our next question is coming from Angela. According to your 5 skills, which do you feel is the most important to making a good supervisor?
Wow, Angela, good question. I'm going to have to say that they're all equally important, because missing one, you're sort of missing an element of what it takes to be a great supervisor. So if I can, I don't know, give great feedback, and I'm really good at that and I excel at that, but yet I'm missing one that says I can't manage relations, that could affect me negatively. Or if I'm perhaps good at, I don't know, organizing the work, but I don't have that relationship interpersonal skill, I'm not very good. So I think they all sort of intertwine with each other and affect each other, so they're all important. So I hope that answers your question. I think they're all important, but they do take development. They do take development.
All right, thank you. And our next question is coming from Dylan. When is it a good time to give this program to my supervisors?
Dylan, awesome question. If you are a manager in training, make sure you prepare people. Even if they aren't supervisors, let them know about these skills. There are sub-skills within each one of these supervisory skill sets that you can start teaching your employees right now, before they have been promoted to a supervisor. Sometimes by the time you promote them to a supervisor, it may be too late, because now they are viewed as they're supposed to know how to be a supervisor. So the more skills and tools you can give them to put in their toolbox for the time they do become the supervisor, the better off they are going to be, and the more successful. You're setting them up for success and not failure.
All right, great. Thank you. And looks like our next question is coming from Bob. How do you ensure there is an application or a transfer of learning after the program?
Oh, awesome. And it was Bob, right? Right, Sarah?
Correct, Bob.
Right. All right, Bob. What I like to do at the end of the program is to make sure they have an action plan or a commitment to say, as a result of, and I even, in fact, with this one, would like them to make a commitment after each one of the skill sets from the training that you just did, and have them tell you what action, specific measurable action, make the SMART goal, that they are going to accomplish when they get back into the workplace. And make sure you follow up on that. Ask them how they're going to do it, and then check up on them to see if they've done it or not, if they had any challenges when they were trying to do it. But you want to make sure, as with any kind of education or learning, is that you want to have that application. So I sort of think about, when I'm designing training programs, is what am I going to tell them? So what? Why is it important? So what? So what? And then now what? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to use it? So I think anything that you could do, like an action plan, I think would be important. Do you have any more questions?
I do. This question is coming from Irma. Do these apply to managers as well? What's the difference between a manager and a supervisor?
Okay, Irma, good question. Thank you. I think these are base skills that a supervisor needs to know once they take the position of a supervisor. And as a manager, they are still important. But as you go up in the ranks in the organization in leadership, you're probably adding to this skill set. So to me, this is sort of baseline skills. And as I said before with Bob, that there's even more, there's other subsets in there like personality style. What's my communication style? I mean, that's another thing you want to know. How to do the coaching, that's another sub-skill you want to know. How to organize, how to plan. So all of those are other sub-skills that are in there, but they sort of build on each other and they come together. So by the time you're a manager, you may be getting into a higher level skill set with them. But these are foundational skills that definitely can be given to managers as well.
All right, perfect. Thanks. And I think we do have time for maybe a few more questions. This question is coming from Shoshana. What do you recommend when the executive leader doesn't support supervisory development, coaching, etc.?
Boy, Shoshana, that's a challenging one. You know what? That's sort of the key to everything that you have organizational support, because I don't know, Shoshana, what position you have in the organization, if it is a trainer or if it is a manager. But if it's a trainer, somehow you have to go and ask her or him, make your case for if you do the training, so our cost-benefit analysis really, what is the benefit of giving the supervisors this training? And it could be you look at employee satisfaction surveys. It could be you look at attrition rates in the organization to see why people are leaving, why they're staying, what they need, and make the case that way. But if you felt comfortable, I would have a conversation with your exec and find out what makes him say that. Sort of find out the why behind the what he's saying to you. Is it because of finances? Is it because he just doesn't believe in it? Is it because it didn't work before? So maybe do a little bit of your own digging to find out the why behind the what of that comment. But that's one of the biggest challenges out there when you don't have leadership support of anything you're trying to do.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And looks like we have time for one more question, and this question is coming from Jessica. And it's about the actual assessment. What, if any, other instrument or activities can I use with this program?
Oh, okay. And this is just from what I have used in this program, especially when I see that supervisors, sometimes when you do the assessment, you'll see that supervisors rate themselves higher than you really think they are. Or when they answer the questions, they may get a higher rating than you actually. They don't know the why behind the what there. So you may see that they answer the question correctly, but for the wrong reason. So you want to dig down a little bit. First of all, some of the other things again I have used were what is my style? What's my style? My communication style. There's also instruments on conflict resolution, on how to deal with it in the correct way. Influencing assertively is great when it has to do with managing relations, as also the communication one is. There are some on using it in coaching to maybe make this even a more robust program. But there's so many out there. You may want to look on the website to see what's available from HRDQ to see some of the things that they have too, because there's some really nice add-ons here. The other thing that I do that I've done with this program is I make an activity card that gives them a scenario and ask them to respond to it. So these are just my own made-up things. So just an activity, so they would ask, they'd sort of like do a role play with them to say maybe an employee comes to you with some concerns about this or that or the other, and you don't agree with them, they're not in line with the organization, how would you actually talk to them? So it has to do with giving them feedback. So having them practice in class is some other activities that I would do, not assessments, but just activities that you can do.
Okay, well, great. And Annette, would you just like to add any final thoughts before I go ahead and wrap this up?
No, I really enjoyed with this webinar, and thank you all for joining us. and I hope I gave you some information that you can take back and use, and certainly would love to hear any other questions that you have. Be more than happy to answer those questions. Thank you, Sarah.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. And yes, that's all the time we have for today. If you submitted a question and we did not get time to it, you're going to receive a response to that question probably early next week. So thank you for your time, and we hope you found today's webinar informative.